What's going on, everybody? Simple back at it like I'm checking my height. Today we're going to be checking out some of the stuff that I apparently missed when it comes to Sabaton. Little did I realize that Sabaton has history lessons put out with each of their videos. I thought the history lesson was included in the music video. Little did I know. I am now aware, though, so we're going to be going back over the Sabaton songs that we have done reactions to, and we're going to be checking out the history lessons that go along with it. I figured, what better way than to start off with the very first song we did, which was Bismarck, than to check out the Battle of the Atlantic history lesson. So let's go.
I'm Indy Nidell.
I'm Per from Sabaton.
And this is Sabaton History.
Yeah.
Germany's
I like that
Bismarck
little
was the
movie camera
largest
thing.
battleship ever built. But of course, being the biggest means you're also the biggest target.
And it was
Yes.
also one of the most requested songs that you guys wanted us to sing about. So we did.
We'll get to the song in just a minute,
That's
but
really
first,
cool.
here's the
Okay.
story of the Bismarck.
This was such a good song, too.
As the construction of the two Bismarck-class battleships began in 1936 in Germany, Britain was anything but worried. By treaty since World War I, Germany could not have any battleships that could challenge France and Great Britain. In 1935, Hitler had even voluntarily agreed to limit the total tonnage of his navy, the Kriegsmarine, to 35% of the British fleet. However, the launch of the first new battleship in February 1939 showed that not only had Hitler disregarded the treaty, the Bismarck class was something the world had never seen. Christened Bismarck by
He
the
kept it
granddaughter
very
of
secret.
Otto von Bismarck, Germany's first chancellor, the ship was, like its twin, the Tirpitz,
that thing.
251 meters long and 36 meters wide, larger than anything the British or French had. Its 8 38-centimeter guns placed in 4 twin turrets were the biggest guns ever placed on a German warship. Additional medium artillery and anti-aircraft guns completed the armaments, while its range-finding center was top of the line. But it was not
Put a
just
lot of
strong
work into that
offensively.
ship.
If it was to go toe-to-toe with French battleships, as had seemed the most logical enemy in 1936, it had to be able to withstand some hits without going down. The main armor belt was up to 32 centimeters of super strong Wotan steel. Its double-walled hull could absorb the shock from a torpedo and disperse it around the hull. The transverse bulkhead was between 11 and 22 centimeters thick and was segmented into 22 compartments that could be individually sealed in case of flooding. Its 12 high-pressure boilers and its munition chambers had an additional armor strength of 8 to 12 centimeters. All in all,
Wow.
with 44% of its weight dedicated to defense, it seemed impossible that this ship could be sunk.
From the mist, a ship is taking form, and the silence of the seas are about to drift into a storm.
By the time the ship was officially commissioned on August 24th, 1940, the war had turned Europe upside down, and it was British shipping, not French, that was the main enemy at sea. The German invasion of Norway had deprived the British of strategic positions in the North Sea. And if the German battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau could combine their strength with both the Bismarck and the Tirpitz, it would mean a daunting German battle group for the British to tackle. And as the battle
Okay.
for Britain raged in the air, German submarines targeted shipping in the Atlantic, Britain's lifeline. If such a battle group joined the hunt for freighters bound for Britain, Britain could be starved into submission. Food rationing had already been imposed on the British public, and the German subs operating from French ports sank over 260,000 tons of shipping in
Wow.
August alone. This
Just in
was
August.
exactly what Admiral Erich Raeder of
That's
the
amazing.
Kriegsmarine had in mind when he gave command of the Bismarck to Admiral Gunther Lutyens. Second in command was Ernst Lindemann. The crew, over 2,000 strong, was not conscripts, but volunteers from all over Germany. They were top-notch men. In the Baltic Sea, the Bismarck had its first training exercise against a mock battle cruiser, Hood. HMS Hood, built at the end of the First World War, was for a long time the British flagship and symbolized the might of the Royal Navy. The first tests were favorable. The Bismarck could reach a top speed of 30.8 knots and outrun any potential threat. But there were two
Oh
weaknesses.
my gosh.
First,
So what was the fastest ship at this time then? This one could reach what, 30.8?
knots and outrun any potential threat. But there
Sick.
were two weaknesses. First, the recoil of the heavy guns was extreme, and it was uncertain if, under combat conditions, the force of the naval guns firing would harm the ship's equipment. The second weakness showed during a simulated rudder failure. Without rudders, it was very hard to maneuver the ship. Well, rudders and propellers were always a weakness on any ship, though, and the German Admiralty dismissed the problem, since hitting the rudder during combat was extremely unlikely.
Okay.
By April 1941, the Bismarck was ready for combat. It was to head back to the North Sea, catch up with the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, and meet Gneisenau in the Atlantic. Raeder gave the order that over 3 months, it was to sink as many freighters as possible. The might of the Bismarck would allow the battle group to even attack guarded convoys. However, at the time, both the Gneisenau and Prinz Eugen were damaged awaiting repairs. The Bismarck waited. On May the 5th, Adolf Hitler visited the ship. Now,
You gotta wonder if things would have went differently had the Bismarck not had to wait.
the Bismarck waited. On May the 5th, Adolf Hitler visited the ship. Now, Hitler was a fan of battleships. He loved the design, but he had no knowledge of tactical or strategic naval warfare. He was, however, fearful when it came to naval operations. On the one hand, he wanted to protect and enhance the propaganda image of the mighty German forces. On the other, he wanted to avoid agitating the neutral Americans and their freight shipping. So the Kriegsmarine kept Hitler in the dark about his plans. On August 18th, the Bismarck and Prinz Eugen were to secretly head into the Atlantic. Those two ships were strong enough to do some serious damage to British trade. It was likely that the British knew that the Bismarck was battle-ready, but still, secrecy was the key to success. Until they reached the Atlantic, the Bismarck could run into a British trap and be overwhelmed by numerically superior forces. But you know, how they hoped to keep the largest battleship in the world floating around out there a secret is beyond me. Anyhow, the 20th, the Bismarck was spotted, and a day later, members of the Norwegian resistance observed the German ship hiding in the fjords. They informed the British. Now, Admiral Sir John Tovey, aboard the new flagship King George V, was chief of the British Home Fleet. He was ordered by the British Admiralty to locate and...
Look at the size of the guns behind that gentleman. It's incredible, the stature and size of a warship. You don't really think about it unless you see one, you know what I mean? Like, it really puts it into perspective.
The British Home Fleet. He was ordered by the British Admiralty to locate and engage the Bismarck. That ship was not to reach the Atlantic, period. Tovey could not, though, know the exact route the Bismarck would take, so he ordered Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland to take the Hood and make for Iceland with HMS Prince of Wales to cut off the most likely path. Back home, the Kriegsmarine informed Hitler about Bismarck's departure on the 23rd. Hitler was furious and wanted to recall the ship, fearing that the pride of Germany might be destroyed. But Raeder assured him that everything was fine, especially now that the German invasion plans for Crete were finalizing.
A lot of
Bismarck
mishaps going
would
on
keep the
here.
British from sending additional ships into the Mediterranean. Spotted again by the evening, two British heavy cruisers, the Suffolk and the Norfolk, had taken its scent. And I mean that quite literally. The Suffolk was equipped with a superior new radar system, and the heavy cruiser shadowed the Bismarck and gave its whereabouts to the rest of the British fleet. Bismarck also seemed to be pursued by bad luck. Not only could they not evade the new radar system, the first time they fired on the pursuing heavy cruisers, the recoil of the guns damaged their own radar system. So they had no idea.
They even wondered that. And then it ends up coming to bite them back in the ass anyway.
Cruisers, the recoil of the guns damaged their own radar system. So they had no idea what was heading their way.
2,000 men and 50,000 tons of steel set the course for the Atlantic with the Allies on the hill.
It was the Hood and the Prince of Wales. The Hood had more guns than the Bismarck, but way less armor. The crew was also inexperienced because since the end of the First World War, it had not fired a shot in combat. The battleships closed in on each other. The first to draw blood was the Prinz Eugen, hitting one of the Hood's munition chambers. And then, just as the Hood was turning to bring its aft guns to bear, the fourth salvo from the Bismarck smashed into it, punching through its armor and detonating inside the ship's main munition chamber. A moment of shock paused the battle, as HMS Hood was engulfed by a giant fireball and split in half. The Prince of Wales returned fire on the Bismarck, damaging it, but was in turn itself hit, which destroyed the bridge and killed the officers. The Prince of Wales turned and fled. Admiral Lutyens decided not to pursue, but to check the damage on Bismarck. It had only received one hit, but was taking on water. One of the boiler rooms had to be abandoned, but more importantly, the foremost fuel depots were leaking. Lutyens evaluated his options. He had damaged the Prince of Wales and destroyed the Hood, a major victory. Indeed, it had been a lucky shot, and the battle had not lasted 10 minutes, but only three.
Most of the good ones
1,419 men aboard the Hood had survived.
Wow.
But the Bismarck could not now reach top speed, and his fuel was lower than planned. Yep, Bismarck was always referred to as a he. Lutyens could return the way he came to Norway or try to break through to Saint-Nazaire, France for repairs. He chose France. The death of the Hood was indeed a shock to the British public. Admiral Tovey was ordered to destroy the Bismarck with all ships available. Norfolk and Suffolk were still shadowing the Bismarck, but neither could slow it down. The only ships close enough to do that were Force H, HMS Sheffield, HMS Renown, and the aircraft carrier Ark Royal, with 18 Swordfish torpedo bombers aboard. Those biplanes looked like World War I, but could reach 100 knots, enough to catch the Bismarck. Lutyens was pessimistic about his chances, since basically the whole British home fleet was on his heels. Force H made contact with the Bismarck May 25th, but the Renown and the Sheffield were too weak to engage. 15 torpedo bombers did instead that night. Such small planes are hard to hit with AA guns, especially at night, and with suicidal bravery they closed in and released torpedoes at 300 meters. The first torpedoes did minimal damage, but Bismarck was hit in the stern while making evasive maneuvers, and inrushing water blocked the rudder. Bismarck's Achilles heel had been hit.
Wow. Okay.
Engineers tried desperately to find a solution, but the water pressure was too high to send in mechanics. The situation seemed hopeless as the British ships closed in. Admiral Lutyens radioed Berlin, "Ship disabled. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." Tovey planned to engage the Bismarck from all sides.
Can you imagine that, the realization that the one thing that could have happened, like nobody thinks about that, like the one thing, oh, that'll never happen, and it happens, and
Lutyens radioed Berlin, "Ship disabled. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." Tovey planned to engage the Bismarck from all sides, with the battleships King George V and Rodney attacking from the west, while the Norfolk would come in from the north and the heavy cruiser Dorsetshire would attack from the east. In the early morning of the 27th, they sighted the slowly swaying Bismarck. Rodney and George V opened fire. Bismarck returned fire, but soon 2 of his turrets were knocked out of action. A shell hit the artillery command center, killing the officers. Lucky hits, but decisive ones. Bismarck was blinded. The shelling continued. By 9:15, Bismarck was a burning wreck. He fired his final shots just after 9:30 as his last turrets were destroyed.
The flagship of the Navy, the terror of the seas, his guns have gone silent at last.
The Bismarck was done. Of the 2,876 shells fired on it, 400 hit the ship in a little over half an hour. Now it was the execution of a helpless enemy. Within the ship, it was pure hell, from poisonous gases, fire, heat, cold water, oil, and blood from the dead and dying. At 10:15, Lindemann, since Lutyens was probably dead at that point, gave the order to abandon ship. This the men who could did, as shells rained down, killing hundreds of sailors. The Dorsetshire fired 3 torpedoes as the final blow, and Bismarck disappeared beneath the waves at 10:40. Just 115 of his crewmen would survive.
wow.
Hitler learned about the disaster not from Admiral Rudder, but from the British press. The Kriegsmarine had refrained from telling him the truth, fearing his anger. And so ends the brief adventures of the Bismarck, the mightiest battleship of all. Again, the biggest ship makes the biggest target.
Yes. Especially when it comes to something as simple as a rudder failure, and you never even... Like I said, there's a lot of different ways that things could have gone very, very differently. Very differently.
So what inspired you to write about the Bismarck?
All right, we get a lot of requests from our fans. Ever since the album
definitely the most interesting
2010,
part right
Coat
here.
of Arms, where we actually asked our fans officially for the first time to send in ideas. I received over 10,000 ideas in just a short period of time. It took me weeks to go through all
Because
of
they'd
them.
write a whole story, not just Bismarck. They'd write, you should do this story about this and this.
Yeah,
and,
well, some people write, you should write a story about Star Wars. And some people write a whole thing.
You guys, Star Wars doesn't count as military history, even though it was a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
When I go through that, there's one of the stories that keeps popping up constantly. And there are so many people who want to hear the story about the battleship Bismarck. I like warships, I like naval warfare.
Yeah.
And for me, this was a topic that I really wanted to cover. We couldn't fit it on Carolus Rex, for obvious
Right,
reasons.
yeah, okay.
We couldn't really fit it in on the heroes, even though you could sort of maybe write it from the perspective of the sailors or something like this.
Sure.
If we would put it on the last stand, yeah, then maybe that would have worked, but we didn't cover it for that. And then we have the cooperation with the gaming company called Wargaming. And they have a game called World of Tanks where Sabaton has a tank inside.
Yeah.
And they also have another game
Yes,
about
we
ships.
checked out that song
World of
too.
Warships.
Yes, correctly. And they asked us if we had any song that would fit to this. And yeah, we do have the song Midway, which is about naval warfare. We thought, okay, this is a great
We'll have to check
opportunity
that one
for
out
us
too when we get
actually
caught
to
up.
write something unique for this. Because we felt this story we want to tell, and we can actually do it outside of an album to gain
Right,
more
okay.
focus on it. And we decided, we went to the studio and we wrote the song Bismarck, and we recorded it, and Wargaming actually helped us to produce a really, really awesome video for it.
Because it is the single.
That's cool.
Well, how was it recording it, making the
was such a
video
good
and everything
video.
that goes with making a single and stuff?
Well, the video was recorded in several locations.
Yeah.
Our main part was filmed on a ship, so we needed to find absolutely open water that would fit
Right.
to the purpose, and a boat that was suitable enough to carry a stage that we could take out on open water. And they sprayed us constantly with water when we were filming it, and it was pretty cold when they were driving full speed with the vessel and filming it over and over again.
Imagine.
Yeah.
And we were so cold, and with the water, it actually freezed our fingers, so in the end we could barely move them at all. But
But the
I
people
think,
filming, they were all wearing jackets and things.
yeah, they were comfortable. They were drinking coffee and just enjoying the sight of us.
It is a tough life being a rock star. Tough life.
But in the end, it turned out to be a really cool video, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I love
Yeah.
the song too. So, and it's great that we have this channel now, so we can even explain it to the people who might have missed the single.
Sure.
Yeah, this is a really cool channel. I like how they've done
So
these history
that was
lessons.
Bismarck.
And this is Sabaton history.
The terror of the seas, Bismarck and the Kriegsmarine.
All right, thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe to the Sabaton History channel. Check out Indie's other channels. And support us on Patreon, because that's what makes this happen.
Hey, you heard the man. Go show your love. All right, we'll be checking out another history lesson pretty soon. Like I said, we won't be doing another Sabaton song until we get caught up, and then we will be changing. We'll be doing the history lessons first, and then we'll be doing the song second, because that seems to be a little bit smarter of a way to do it, right? Let's learn about it before we hear the song. So let me know what you guys thought about this one in the comments below. Make sure you check out one of the other videos currently floating around, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.